So let's get into lighting a little bit. So in KEYSHOT, there's two main types of lights that you can use. One of them is a map. The other one is just using an object and putting a light material on it. So if you zoom out completely, you see that your object, your scene, is in a sphere. That sphere, around that sphere, you project. If it loads a day faster, could it load faster? I think it might have crashed actually. So you'll notice that you have a sphere, and every time you change your HDR image, your sphere changes. And that's kind of it. You know, on the inside of the sphere, you just have this coating, and you get the light information from it, and it's pretty fast. And most of the time, if you're just looking for something quick and clinical, all right. So let's say you just want to render this. You want to render this quickly, all right? So you're gonna use a map that you like. I personally like the bathroom one. You know, bathroom selfies are always the best selfies. So carry on the tradition, right? Or at least, what was that expression, right? It's like if it's working, you know, just keep going. Something like that. I might be misremembering it. Anyways, so I like to add a little bit of a blur to an environment. It's not super necessary, but whenever you have things that are super reflective, it can be really distracting if in one of the reflections you notice, like, I don't know, the bathroom sink or something. So I usually put a little bit of a blur on it, or a lot of a blur, like 78% blur, you know. And you know, so I have it here, and then I go and I set the background to a color, and sometimes I go for black. It's a little too sterile in my opinion, so you know, maybe white is too sterile. Not too sterile, but it's sterile in the right direction. So now here you go. You have a you know, just kind of like a sterile basic render. You add, I like to use the matte gray material, and this is what I refer to as the geometry check phase. So during this time, you just want to take a bunch of shots, just kind of like sterile shots of your model at different angles, so that you familiarize yourself with the geometry once again, but without all the materials, and it's just form. Right now, this is just light that is describing an object, and that's it. This renders very quickly. Sometimes you can use this in Toon as well. You can, instead of using the matte white, you can use Toon. I have a tune that I specifically made for Mac previews. So you could use that just to kind of check the design if you're working on, you know, a project that maybe requires that. But no matter what it is I'm sculpting, may it be a mech, an object, a prop, an environment, at one point or another, I'm going to just have it matte gray, not matte white, because matte white blows out. Not matte black. Well, you can use matte black, but I don't know. I just don't think it's as exciting. I think matte gray, perfectly in between, and you make sure that you like what you see as just a gray render. If things are not working here, it means that your form is not working. It means that there is something in the transitions that's not working. It picks up the light funny, or your pose might be weird. You know, something. This is the time when it should be engaging. Maybe not super realistic, but it should be engaging, and you should like it here. So what I can do is, when I have actual shots and everything is rendered, I can just go. I can just go and I can look at my shots, and hang on. I can go I can look at my shots, and I can start thinking about certain things that I want to see. That's for a bit later. So here's something. Do you see right here? I would like this transition to be something very cool. I want people to have a reason to read into here and to notice that there is a cut here. So that's one thing I want to be thinking about. I really like this. I don't know if we'll get a chance to show it off, but I really like this. This almost bothers me. I think there maybe should be a cap or something here. I might go back in Moe and change this. I'm not sure how I feel about this yet. Let's see. What else did I think about this? Yeah, I think that's what I have to say for now. So let's do a little bit of lighting trials and practices. So let's make our environment a little bit darker. Or actually, no. Let's leave it as it is. So we can keep the HDRI, or we can make it just all black. Let that load for a second. So what happens if you have it in all black is that you're going to have absolutely no source of light, which, as you can imagine, will give you nothing but a black screen. So as you can see, the screen is pitch black, despite the fact that there's a robot hand, like right in the middle of it. So let's go. And so actually there's a couple of things that you could do. Quick redaction, just use the add geometry feature in KEYSHOT and not ZBrush. In KEYSHOT, you actually get to keep that geometry, whereas with ZBrush, you have to continuously re-import and readjust everything. That was sort of just like poor planning on my part. So, you know, do as I say, not as I did. Alright, back to the tutorial. So let's set itself up, and it's probably gonna be this one. So now you go to materials, you go to your light materials. You can use an area light. Let's crank this up a little bit. Let's crank this up by a lot. There we go. So now you're using an object to render, you're using an object as your light source to render your scene. So what this allows you to do is it allows you, so personally I see just grabbing these little balls of light, I see this as just a license to be dramatic. So if you want to, you know, kind of have some fun, you know, push it around, you know, see what you can do. You know, create a mood. So here is a little bit of a cheat. Not cheat, but a little bit of a trick whenever you're doing something like this. So the first thing you want to do, actually, which is not the trick, is you want to make it invisible to camera when you're not using it, unless you want it to be. So I've used these to create artificial suns and moons, not moons, stars before, and I've used them as, you know, like headlights and so on, parts and headlights and so on. But if you don't want it to be visible, you know, it's there. You can move it, and as you edit it, you can, you know, make it visible again so you can see it. But here's something that I tend to do. So in the environment, you can go and you can give it just the slightest little bit of light, and you can set your background to be whatever color you wanted to pretend it was. And now you see that you can actually see the design despite the fact that, you know, this environment is supposed to be pitch black. All right. So you can do things like this, maybe lighten up your background a little bit too to match. Or you can go back in and just crank down the brightness until you basically can't see anything. You know, so it depends. It depends on you. It depends on how you want to go about. Do you want, you know, this sort of like drama where you can barely see anything, but it's a mech and it's kind of ominous, and maybe I could crank this up a little bit. Warm it up some. There we go. And let's make everything a little bit bigger. You know, so is this your style? You know, where it's like moody, dramatic, not super, you know, big on visibility. You know, giving it a few more angles. So anyways, as you can probably tell, this is definitely one of my favorite it's one of my favorite ways of setting up a scene for lighting. I just think it's just so much fun. You just kind of go in there and, you know, cause some chaos. You know, I find it to be very satisfying to light scenes this way. You can use, you know, you can of course use your general knowledge of sculpting and lighting, and you can as well. So what I did there is I just wanted just kind of like a top rear light, nothing too fancy really. You know, just something, because I have a light here off to the side. Let me just, you know, let me just set the material back to visible to camera for a second. Yeah, so you know, so I already have a light source here off to the side, a little bit to the front. Figured, you know, I need to okay, so you know, I figured I'd put one here, a little bit higher above, you know, give it like that top down view, and then you know, get kind of what I'm getting right now, which is a whole different this is very horror movie-esque, or maybe dark sci-fi-esque, but I kind of like it. You know, there are ways to do that more clinical render I was showing you, and this is just a more dramatic render. You know, so since we're focusing on the hand, one thing we can do here is I'm going to just grab a part of the hand. So the palm's good. The palm's a good part. And I'm going to right click on it in the list, and I'm going to go set as camera target. So now the camera is fixated on it. Well, tries to keep it, you know, in the center or in frame as much as possible, and uses it as a rotation source whenever it can. So it's good to help you kind of set up your shots a little bit. You know what you're focusing on. You know, and you can get, let me move this aside. Let me move these. Uh-oh, and I lost my image size again. So let me just set this. So if you like to have your windows kind of floating around like me, but you don't want to, you know, accidentally mess up your renders like this, what you can do Let me actually just put it back real quick. What you can do is you can go to Windows, you can remove docking, and now it will just not let you do that anymore. See? Now you can't mess it up even if you try. Alright, so let's get back to it. So, you know, I'm thinking I need something here in order to make this hand show up. I think it's nice how it shows up here, but I think it needs a light maybe underneath or going straight towards the hand. I may need to reset my computer pretty soon. It's acting strangely. Okay. So one thing you can do if you kind of don't like using the main viewer is you can either go to performance mode or you can go where is it? Okay. Anyways. I'm gonna add one more. Okay. I think we're going to use this. Let's just let's let it render and see what this looks like. Alright, so at this point I've let it render for a little bit, and I like this angle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the camera and I'm going to pick the camera. I'm going to lock it. You can name it and lock it. I usually just lock it because for things like this I'll only use maybe 3 or 4 cameras. For some projects you may find yourself with just way more cameras. I think the most I've ever used was like maybe 10. It depends what it is you're building. So if you're working on an environment, you might have a lot of cameras. If you're working on an environment with multiple characters in it, you might have a lot of cameras. And remember that cameras isn't just the location, it is the lens you're using. It's pretty much anything under this tab here that you change, it's gonna be that. Another thing that you can do on top of cameras is actually to use the render and create a render queue. That's another thing you can do, but the render queue will save your exact settings. So we'll go over the fine minutia of things like that later on. But what I'm going to do now is that I like where my lights are coming from. I don't like the intensity of every light. So for example, I'm going to show you something. I'm going to reduce the power of this one pretty significantly. Let's turn it off completely, actually. So turning it off completely makes me realize that what I actually wanted was for the blue light to be more powerful. So there's a couple of ways that I can make the blue light more powerful. I can make it more saturated. Now it just has more of an impact without necessarily being brighter. Or I could just make it brighter. Pretty straightforward, I would argue. And I'm actually just going to do a little bit of both. I don't like it being blue. I don't like it being so blue. If anything, I might make it white. So, fun little color theory bit. If you have a warm light and a white light, the white light will appear to be blue or cool. If you have a cool light and a white light, the white light will appear to be warmer. So in situations like this, where maybe you don't want to change the color, what you can do is you can change, so you could change this to gray and then change the other one and make it even warmer. Let's kind of exaggerate a little bit. And you know, you can see how this appears to be cool. Alright. So we're not gonna do either of those, actually. I'm going to just maybe take this and just make it a little bit more powerful, and that's it. Make this a bit more powerful. Make this a bit weaker. I'm gonna check my lighting settings. Okay, so I have pretty low ray bounces, and I do not have interior mode on. So I'm going to turn interior mode on. What interior mode does is that it gives you just like diffuse light just around the room. So everything seems a little bit better lit, essentially. Or there's just more light floating about. So when interior mode was off, remember you could, no, actually, let's go back to product. When interior mode was off, you know, you weren't getting a little bit of light from everywhere. It's very similar to the effect I showed earlier with where you just kind of change up the color of your environment just a tiny bit. But so now, the problem I have with this is that now it creates this incredibly dramatic pole difference between the background and the arm, which I don't really like. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this all the way down. I'm going to see if that helps. If not, I can do the exact opposite and just crank. Oh, wait a minute. Is this? Oopsie. That is the I meant to do it to this one. There we go. Just a little bit. I think like 3% is probably fine. And let's give it a hue that is not something abominable. Alright, can you give it like a hue that's humane? You know, humane. Let's see. And let's just kill saturation down to maybe here. I've been really enjoying just profoundly dark blues like this, so I think this is what's gonna stay. It helps the yellow light kind of pop. There's still a couple of things I would like to do as far as integration. There's something off about this ball. This light ball. I'm gonna move it. I'm not scale it. No. Let me see what happens if I make it smaller and make it more intense. I almost want it to just come up, which is quite possibly what I'll end up doing. So I'm gonna hit free camera real quick. And I'm just gonna move this little guy. Where the hell is he? Yeah. You know what? It felt like he needed to be higher. So I put him. No. No, that is not. That's not gonna work. Let's see. So sometimes the solution is to just give your light source a weird shape like this that does all the things that you want it to do. It's a little bit too, oopsie. It's a little too strong now. No, okay. So I'm just gonna backspace until I have it at a reasonable size. Oh, actually, I remember what size it was. It was 1. So just put it back to 1, and I'm just gonna move it up a little bit instead of the deformation. So remember that this is, this is a lot of trial and error. It's a lot of trial and error. Yeah, now I'm open to it being a weaker color. So now I'm just gonna drop this. I'm gonna drop this again. So when you're kind of running short on patience for things to render, don't be afraid to just make your scene smaller. That way it renders a lot faster. So I'm barely okay with it. I think this might be time to let it sit. Huh? So, because I'm just a curious person, I actually would like to set up something for here. I think that would be a different lighting scene altogether, because I do want to be able to show off this. No, I'm gonna have to. Looks a little awkward. This may require a bit more thought. Maybe a different pose altogether. Anyways, let's go back to the one we had agreed on. So, at this point, I've got myself quite a few renders. And they're all just geometry checks. I think I like this render better. I think I like the previous one better. This is a bit much. I like this. This was more subtle. It was more of something to lead you. Well, the focal point for this is right. But this works better overall. So let's see if we can maybe. Let's unlock the camera for just a second and hit depth of field, select focal point. Let's go for this and see if this does anything. Probably not really at the kind of angle where that would matter.